The story opens in the middle of a battle. Exocia loudly declares her intention to capture Kairi. He questions her capability while effortlessly blocking her attacks. Inwardly, he gushes over her earnest fighting style, finding her incredibly cute. Kairi, whose real name is Ibusuki Ibuki, is actually an otaku who reincarnated into his favorite manga world. In this reality, supernatural powers exist. He is fully aware that he is merely a background character, while she is the main protagonist fighting against an evil organization. The events shift to earlier that morning. Ibuki steps outside, expecting Hinata to leave at the same time. She steps out and expresses nervousness about joining the Prim Libra White Scale Order. He reassures her to have confidence since her dream is coming true. She smiles and inquires about his college experience and upcoming part-time job, before wishing him the best and departing. He internally panics over how precious she is, struggling to handle her kindness. Seeing her in the exact uniform from the manga completely overwhelms him. Even after 15 years since his reincarnation, he still struggles to contain his immense admiration. Suddenly, Kushina approaches from behind, apologizing for the wait. He clarifies that he was simply talking with Hinata. Kushina acknowledges this and urges him to hurry so they are not late for work. While waiting at the bus stand in front of a massive building, Ibuki mentions that it will soon be exactly 100 years ago when humanity lived without Lux. Kushina already knows, having seen numerous television specials about the upcoming anniversary. Suddenly, someone shouts at Ibuki, harshly criticizing him for trying to board the regular bus as a man. The angry commuter insists he should ride the designated men-only bus, which is currently completely packed, because he lacks Lux. Kushina swiftly intervenes, firmly stating that he is her companion. This quickly silences the complaints. Once seated on the bus, Ibuki reflects on their broken society. Because Lux almost exclusively manifests in women, men are largely treated as incompetent and worthless. The concept of gender equality no longer exists. Even though they are on a regular route, he feels incredibly awkward standing out on the female-dominated transport. They eventually arrive at a cafe. Kushina breathes a sigh of relief to be in a calming environment. He thanks her for her daily help and then asks if this ordinary shop is genuinely the Naga Messiah hideout. She confirms his suspicions. A waitress named Yuika approaches their table. She speaks entirely in contradictions, claiming to happily intrude on their conversation. Kushina explains that the waitress is only capable of speaking in lies. He immediately realizes this trait must be her specific Lux ability. Yuika hands over their orders along with their very first mission as official members of Naga Messiah. The scene shifts to Ibuki standing atop a tall building. He peers down at the street below. Bystanders spot his Naga Messiah cloak and panic, urging each other to flee before the police arrive. Unbothered, he focuses on his sole mission, creating a diversion. He recalls his earlier conversation with Kushina. She explained that she would act as the main attacking force on the opposite side of the station. His task is simply to draw attention away from her and buy at least 10 minutes against Hinata. Right on cue, Hinata lands on the roof with enough force to shake the entire structure. She represents the expert combatants who fight supernatural crimes against the evil Naga Messiah organization. She formally introduces herself as an exorcist of the Prim Libra 10th branch and asks if he belongs to the enemy group. He confirms his allegiance, introducing his code name as Separator. Immediately after, he turns and sprints away. Confused by his sudden retreat, she demands that he stop. Instead, he leaps boldly from the edge of the building. As he falls, he reflects on the original manga's storyline, where his character was meant to be mere cannon fodder. He has no intention of repeating that fate. He lands smoothly and safely on an adjacent rooftop. The onlookers gasp in amazement, realizing he possesses a rare Lux. Hinata yells in surprise at seeing a man born with this power. He simply taunts her with a wave of his finger, deeply irritating her. Furious, she sprouts glowing wings and gives chase across the rooftops. As he runs, he admits to himself that he could have just stood his ground. However, as a reincarnated superfan, he desperately wants a front row seat to see his favorite character's iconic abilities in action. Eventually, they end up facing each other again. He compliments her impressive speed for closing the gap so quickly. She brushes off the praise, stating she has no time for idle chatter and must quickly stop his allies from causing chaos elsewhere. Ibuki smirks and teases her about being anxious, guessing this must be her very first mission. Hinata angrily denies the accusation, declaring her pride as a Prim Libra member. Chuckling, he calls her a newbie and resumes his escape across the buildings. Furious, she vows not to let him get away and chases after him. He soon drops down to the ground level, expertly navigating through a dense maze of pipes. He knows her acceleration ability only boosts her speed and does not actually enhance her physical strength. By using the cluttered environment, he plans to obstruct her path and easily slow her down. However, she pushes through the obstacles without hesitation, rapidly closing the distance between them. He finds her fierce determination endearing, but suddenly realizes a major flaw in her reckless pursuit. While Prim Libra members must wear mandatory uniforms, they are customized to individual preferences. Her specific outfit, which includes a skirt, is completely unsuited for steep, acrobatic jumps. Because of her restrictive clothing, she loses her balance mid-air and tumbles downward. Ibuki quickly steps in and catches her before she hits the ground. Flustered, she demands to be put down immediately. As he smiles, a strange sensation suddenly washes over him. He realizes his own lux, Umbra, is activating against his will. Recalling the waitress's cryptic warning that they are not actually comrades, he gently sets her down and apologizes in advance. Looking as though she is about to cry, she is completely caught off guard when he suddenly pulls her into a tight hug, leaving her utterly confused. Every lux comes with a mandatory price known as an Umbra. Ibuki recalls his earlier conversation at the cafe with Yuika. He had deduced that since her Umbra forces her to speak in lies, her actual lux must involve the truth. She denied this, which confirmed his theory. Knowing a person's Umbra often reveals the nature of their power. For Ibuki, the Umbra of his separation ability requires physical contact. Back in the present, while holding Hinata, he realizes he overused his power during the chase. This drastically extends the time he must remain in contact with her to pay the price. After finally fulfilling the magical condition, he pushes away and apologizes. She is highly emotional and completely flustered by the situation. Realizing things are getting awkward and wanting to stay in character, he checks his stopwatch. Exactly 10 minutes have passed, meaning his diversion mission is complete. He quickly bids her farewell and flees the scene. Later, back at the cafe, he sulks in his seat. He feels immense guilt for holding his favorite protagonist longer than necessary, only to satisfy the condition of his power. Yuika serves him food and congratulates him on his first mission. Speaking in her usual contradictions, she claims she heard on the radio that he barely did anything. He quickly realizes this means she actually watched his impressive rooftop acrobatics on the television news. She then expresses curiosity about his exact powers. Kushina enters the cafe and notes the lively conversation. He welcomes her back, acknowledging her hard work. She observes that he still has some lingering energy and suggests they finish whatever tasks remain. Kushina urges Ibuki to hurry and complete their usual routine. He typically relies on her to fulfill his Umbra's physical contact requirement. Having already paid the price during his mission, he no longer needs to do this. However, he panics, realizing that if he refuses, she will immediately suspect he fulfilled the condition with someone else. To avoid her questions, he steps forward and embraces her. Without the magic forcing the action, he feels completely embarrassed and overwhelmed with guilt for deceiving her. She eventually steps back, noting that the embrace felt unusually strong. He simply agrees, secretly berating himself for his highly suspicious behavior. Yuika watches the exchange with amusement. As they sit down to eat, she cryptically points out the rules of his Umbra. She looks directly at him and begins to ask if he hasn't already completed his requirement. Panicking, he quickly interrupts her. Realizing her lux likely involves seeing through falsehoods, he tries to distract her by guessing her true power out loud. She claps and calls his guess completely wrong, which immediately confirms he is absolutely right. Confused, Kushina asks what they mean about his Umbra, but he frantically brushes the topic aside. Suddenly, an unnamed man enters the cafe, stating he heard an unusual customer had arrived. She plays dumb, but the newcomer presses the issue, mentioning the specific recruit she brought in 2 years ago. The man places a hand on Ibuki's head, addressing him as the newbie. He casually confirms his identity and asks the stranger for his name. In response, the man simply smiles. Staring at the newcomer, Ibuki immediately recognizes him as the villain who brutally defeated his favorite manga character in the story's 3rd volume. The man arrogantly introduces himself as Guki. He sits down and heavily insults Ibuki for hiding behind a woman for the past 2 years. With a menacing glare, he demands that the rookie become his subordinate, bragging about his strictly all-male faction that refuses to rely on female Lux users. Before Ibuki can refuse, Kushina stands up and calls the demand ridiculous. Enraged, Guki slams his hand on the table, but she swiftly presses a knife against his neck, coldly ordering him to be quiet. Realizing he is at a severe disadvantage, he backs off and leaves the cafe, promising to return later. Once the dust settles, Ibuki pieces together that Makoto and Satsuna are the official codenames for Yuika and Kushina. Kushina ignores his realization and warns him that just because they are all in Nega Messiah, it does not mean they are allies. The organization attracts many bitter and dangerous individuals who feel disadvantaged by society, making rogue members like Guki a serious threat. Ibuki easily brushes off the concern, confidently stating that he knows she will protect him. She blushes deeply in response, and Yuika immediately points out her obvious embarrassment. Flustered, Kushina quickly changes the subject, warning him to be careful when she is not around. She then announces that their next mission is happening the very next day. They are planning to ambush a transport to rescue one of their executives, who frequently manages to get caught. Meanwhile, inside a prison cell, a captive laughs to herself. She desperately craves a smoke, but knows she just needs to hold on a little longer until her rescue arrives. The next day arrives, marking the start of the second mission. Over the radio, Kushina asks Ibuki to confirm if the Exosia he fought the previous day was actually Hinata. When he confirms this, she expresses concern about his identity being compromised. However, she quickly reassures him that their uniform robes possess a cognitive inhibition effect. As long as he wears the hood, his face cannot be recognized. He laughs nervously in response. Internally, he celebrates his successful escape from their previous battle, which allowed him to completely avoid the original manga's plotline where his identity is exposed. With the robe protecting him, he is thrilled at the prospect of acting as a subordinate. It gives him the perfect excuse to support his favorite protagonist from the front row while keeping his daily life secure. He also looks forward to potentially seeing the other heroines from the story. Kushina interrupts his daydreaming, announcing that it is finally time to move. A police transport vehicle travels down the road below them. Following their discussed plan, they both leap from their vantage point to intercept it. Inside the armored vehicle, the captive spots them through the metal grille, thrilled that the ambush has finally begun. While approaching the transport route, Ibuki and Kushina finalize their strategy. Because the path travels through a hilly district with varying elevations, he jokes that she will have to handle all the enemies once they drop down. She playfully complains about carrying such a massive burden. They smoothly land on the roofs of the moving police vehicles. She immediately tells him to step back and provide backup while she handles everything. When he expresses surprise, she reminds him of his earlier joke. 5 escorts emerge onto the roofs of the cars. One shouts an alert, identifying the ambush as a Nega Messiah assault. Before he can finish speaking, Kushina teleports directly behind him and knocks him unconscious with a swift strike to the neck. The remaining attackers stay on high alert, recognizing her teleportation lux. Calculating that her range is relatively short, they attempt to surround her and coordinate strikes from multiple angles. She easily dodges a spear thrust from above. Another attacker tries to block her escape route, but she expertly intercepts the weapon and disarms her opponent in one fluid motion. Watching the fight, Ibuki muses about true strength, as it's not just her teleportation ability. She is a highly skilled martial artist, making her an incredible force in combat. She quickly takes down the remaining enemies, causing the escort cars to crash into each other in the chaos. She stands victorious atop the main prisoner transport van. Analyzing the situation, he notes that defeating her safely requires an ultra-long-range attacker. He suddenly realizes something is very wrong. The enemy escorts only utilized close combat abilities like physical enhancement and ice weapons. Knowing her formidable reputation, bringing only close-quarters fighters puts them at a severe disadvantage, heavily implying the entire setup is a trap. Suddenly, the first escort that Kushina previously knocked out regains consciousness and fiercely provokes her. Ibuki instantly realizes the guard is merely trying to draw her attention away from a sneak attack. He urgently shouts for her to dodge. Trusting his warning, she leaps out of the way just as a small blade shoots down from above, narrowly missing her. She lands safely on the bridge beside him and expresses her gratitude for the timely alert. A newcomer appears in the sky, levitating with several small knives hovering around her. She casually apologizes for missing her target. Seeing her azure hair, her blue-lined uniform, and her 4 distinct swords, Ibuki immediately recognizes her as Utsurugi Rui. She is a renowned prodigy from Black Libra and another of his favorite manga heroines. He internally geeks out, recalling that beneath her cool exterior, she harbors a fiercely overprotective, tsundere-like affection for Hinata. Rui greets Kushina sarcastically, promising that she will capture both of them today. While he continues to silently fanboy over the encounter, Kushina notices the prisoner transport van slipping away. He steps forward, confidently telling her to chase after the vehicle while he handles the aerial attacker. Realizing he is completely serious, she quickly departs to finish the rescue. Left alone with him, Rui mocks his attempt to split them up, questioning if he truly believes he can handle her alone. Spotting the spider lily emblem on his cape, she deduces that he is the rumored male subordinate. Radiating intense hostility, she demands he die and launches a sword directly at him with menacing speed. He barely manages to evade the strike, suffering a small cut on his cheek. As he recovers his footing, he nervously realizes her killing intent is dangerously high. Hovering in the sky, Rui relentlessly hurls her knives at Ibuki. Sensing the immense danger, he leaps down from the bridge. The blades track his movements, but he barely manages to dodge them. Landing safely, he realizes his hood almost flew off. He resolves to protect his disguise at all costs. As he flees, he demands to know why she is attacking him. She furiously accuses him of humiliating Hinata. Ibuki realizes that news of his forced embrace from the previous day reached her incredibly quickly. In the original story, Rui does not use that affectionate nickname until much later. He concludes that his actions drastically accelerated her protectiveness over her partner. Enraged that her teammate was so deeply distressed by the encounter, she vows to eliminate him and unleashes another fierce barrage of levitating knives. While dodging, he analyzes her psychokinesis lux. She can freely manipulate any object that weighs equal to or less than her own body weight. Because it includes her own mass, she can use the power on herself to fly. He acknowledges how overwhelmingly powerful she is. As a truck approaches from the front, he smoothly vaults over it. He compares her immense power to his own lux, separation. His ability can pull apart two touching objects, but only by a tiny distance and for a fraction of a second. It carries a severe restriction. He must see both objects simultaneously with perfect, split-second timing. The power is so incredibly weak that even Yuika was visibly confused when she first learned about it. Despite its limitations, he uses separation to repel her attacks. With perfect timing, he punches an incoming blade, separating its trajectory just enough to repel it directly into another knife, neutralizing both. Surprised by his defense, her eyes widen. Meanwhile, he complains aloud about how heavy the swords are, jokingly estimating they must weigh almost exactly her body weight. Highly offended, she dives in for a physical kick. He successfully blocks the strike, but she quickly analyzes his movements, noting that his neutralization ability clearly has limits since he is forced to dodge or block certain attacks. Ibuki realizes she is quickly figuring out his limitations. He decides he needs to keep her distracted, though he still cannot bring himself to attack his favorite character. He admires her captivating presence, noting that he cannot look away. Suddenly, Rui points a finger, and the handle of a blade violently strikes him from behind. Gritting his teeth, he realizes she sneakily manipulated the very first sword he deflected earlier. She launches a relentless assault, inflicting multiple cuts across his body. He curses his own carelessness, recognizing that her true strength lies far beyond her raw psychokinesis. She wields her lux with such lethal precision that a single misstep means certain death. Her graceful, deadly control over her floating blades has earned her the infamous title of Maestro. The overwhelming barrage of swords eventually knocks him straight through the wall of a nearby building. Rui steps inside the rubble and approaches his downed figure, raising her blade for a finishing strike. However, as the dust settles, his hood falls back and exposes his face. She pauses in sudden silence, dropping her weapon in surprise. Glaring at him, she coldly remarks that he must have used this exact face to tease Hinata. He desperately denies the accusation, insisting he did absolutely nothing of the sort. Refusing to listen to his excuses, she covertly summons another sword from behind him. Blinded by the settling dust, he fails to spot the incoming weapon in time, and the blade pierces through him. Instead of dying from the strike, Ibuki suddenly turns into a cloud of smoke right as the sword hits him. Rui shouts in confusion and tries to grab the mist, but fails. Kushina successfully used her teleportation lux to swap him out at the last second and save his life. Safely back with his partner, he asks if the rescue is complete, and she confirms it is. Meanwhile, the remaining escorts report over the radio that the Niga Messiah executive successfully made contact and freed the captive. Hearing this, Rui deduces that the smoke was the result of an exchange teleportation. Inside the getaway vehicle, the rescued captive complains about a sudden slam on the brakes, angrily claiming she almost bit her tongue off. Kushina ignores the complaint and tosses a package to her. The captive sheds her disguise, ties her hair back, and reveals herself as Shion, the fourth executive of Niga Messiah. Shion notices her rescuer glaring and pinching her nose in disgust. Kushina bluntly retorts that it would have been better if she had actually bitten her tongue off. Furious, Shion challenges her to a physical fight right then and there. Kushina casually mocks her for being foolish enough to get caught in the first place. The two immediately launch into a bitter argument over proper gratitude. Watching them bicker, Ibuki realizes they truly do not get along. He intervenes to calm the tension, jokingly referring to the rescued executive as a social misfit. She angrily snaps at him to stop calling her that. Kushina officially declares the mission complete, causing Ibuki to sigh with relief. Shien notes that their only remaining task is to escape safely. However, a sword suddenly shoots toward them from a nearby building, forcing Kushina to narrowly dodge the blade. Rui arrives, levitating menacingly in the air, and refuses to let them slip away. Shien smirks and playfully taunts her in response. Unfazed, Rui reveals she did not come alone. A squad of reinforcements quickly surrounds the trio. As the aerial attacker doubts they will be able to talk their way out of this, Ibuki panics internally. He notes the massive overkill of the enemy forces and realizes they are completely trapped. Shin exhales a thick cloud of smoke and confidently takes charge, noting that both her rescuer and the rookie did an excellent job holding the line. Deciding it is time to get her own hands dirty, she steps forward to face the surrounding enemy squad, eager for her first real taste of the outside world since being captured. Ibuki tries to intervene, but Kushina holds him back and urgently orders him to close his eyes. He complies, just as the smoke aggressively expands across the battlefield. The massive plume instantly morphs into perfect doppelgangers of the attackers, turning the illusions against their original counterparts. Refusing to be intimidated, Rui urges her squad not to panic over mere tricks. Peeking with one eye, Ibuki watches in awe as the enemy force is completely overwhelmed by the chaotic illusions. He asks if closing their eyes protected them from the visual trap, and Shien confirms this, urging them to use the opening to escape. Furious and humiliated, Rui blindly lashes out with her sword, accidentally striking one of her own squad members. Shien casually mocks the terrible maneuver. Enraged, the aerial attacker swings wildly at what she assumes is another fake obstacle, only to violently strike a solid steel support beam. The impact shatters the structural integrity of the surrounding construction site, causing a massive steel cage to collapse directly onto the attackers. Standing victorious over the trapped squad, Shien formally introduces herself as the illusionist executive of Niga Messiah. As the remaining enemies scramble to retreat, a pinned Rui furiously vows revenge against the organization. Later, the trio successfully returns to the safety of the cafe. Due to his Umbra, Ibuki is forced to hold Kushina to pay the magical price for his power. Shien finds the situation absolutely hilarious and relentlessly teases her fellow executive about looking cute. He quickly steps in, asking the illusionist to stop making the situation worse. Laughing loudly, Shien jokes that it is the greatest Umbra ever and playfully accuses him of enjoying the excuse. Flustered and completely embarrassed, Kushina glares intensely at him and quietly threatens his life. Before Ibuki can dwell on the embrace any further, Kushina abruptly pushes him away, signaling that his Umbra is fulfilled. Dropping the awkwardness instantly, she points out a fatal weakness the recent battle exposed. He has absolutely no offensive capabilities. Currently, his only options in a fight are to run or take a hit. She advises him to get a weapon, not necessarily to hurt anyone, but to give himself the option to fight back. When he hesitates, she points out that even Shien manages to pseudo-attack despite having a non-offensive Lux. Shien interrupts to explain her abilities, confirming her Lux is illusion. She reveals that her Umbra is a preemptive type. She must smoke her pipe before she can activate her powers. She brags about being so generous with her secrets, playfully mocking Kushina for being overly secretive. Kushina quickly retorts, calling her careless and pointing out that she constantly gets drunk and captured. Ignoring the insult, the illusionist formally introduces herself to Ibuki as Adashino Mion, the fourth seat of the sixth apostasy. She casually offers to take him in as her own subordinate if he ever gets tired of his current boss. Kushina fiercely threatens her in response, sparking another loud argument between the two executives. Watching the chaotic banter, Ibuki jokingly suggests that they actually get along surprisingly well. Both women immediately and loudly deny the claim, and even Yuika chimes in to confirm their mutual dislike. Meanwhile, in a completely different location, Hinata paces nervously back and forth. Gathering her courage, she types out a message to Ibuki. Apologizing for the suddenness, she asks if he would like to hang out with her on Sunday. The weekend finally arrives. Hinata heads to the meeting spot, wondering if Ibuki is already waiting. When she arrives, she spots two people aggressively trying to hang out with him. He politely declines their offers, stating he is waiting for someone. Annoyed by the intrusion, Hinata steps forward and firmly announces that she is the one he is waiting for, prompting the intruders to quickly leave. Noticing she is slightly frustrated, he tries to cheer her up by offering to buy whatever clothes she wants today as an apology. She quickly declines, admitting she was simply overwhelmed with excitement about their outing. Her genuine happiness makes him incredibly nervous as he suddenly realizes this is their very first time going out completely alone. When she asks if he is bored, he covers up his panic by claiming he is just worried because he has never picked out clothes for anyone before. Internally, he reminds himself to stay focused. He remembers Rui calling her by an affectionate nickname during their recent battle, an event that is not supposed to happen until much later in the original manga timeline. One of his primary goals today is to figure out why the story has changed. Hinata suddenly mentions that someone else insisted on joining them today. Right on cue, Rui appears from behind, tightly hugging Hinata and loudly praising her casual outfit. Ibuki completely panics, realizing his dangerous enemy is standing right in front of him. Hinata tries to properly introduce them, but Rui ignores the pleasantries. She glares intensely at Ibuki and aggressively marches toward him, clearly recognizing him from their fight. Desperate to survive the encounter without blowing his cover, he decides to play the villain. Leaning in closely, he quietly leverages his established, close relationship with Hinata, quietly warning Rui to watch her attitude or risk upsetting their mutual companion. Furious but unwilling to cause a scene, Rui grits her teeth and coldly introduces herself, fiercely declaring her position as the ultimate companion to Hinata. Fortunately, Rui refrains from launching an attack. Because his face was exposed during their previous battle, she clearly recognizes him as the enemy subordinate. However, she cannot openly attack him in public without causing a massive scene and blowing her cover. Realizing he is safe for the moment, Ibuki mentally breathes a heavy sigh of relief. Ignorant to the intense hostility between them, Hinata cheerfully approaches. She expresses amazement at how well they are getting along despite having just met. Both of them immediately and loudly deny the observation. As the trio continues walking through the bustling mall, chaos suddenly erupts. Guki aggressively crashes into the middle of the shopping center, accompanied by a large group of hostile subordinates. Ibuki instantly spots the menacing threat, recognizing the brutal villain from his earlier encounter at the cafe. Seeing the overwhelming number of enemies flooding the area, Hinata urgently tells him to run to safety. He quickly questions what she and her partner plan to do if he leaves. Without hesitation, she bravely declares that they will stay behind to protect all the innocent bystanders. When Hinata was just 5 years old, she was caught in a dangerous incident and saved by an Exosia. The hero praised her bravery, which instantly inspired her lifelong dream to become an Exosia herself. Back in the present, she faces off against Guki and fiercely vows to capture him. He becomes annoyed, complaining that he has already been chased around and irritated by Rui. Deciding to blow off some steam, he orders his subordinates to attack the innocent bystanders. The attackers suddenly transform into wolves and charge forward. Before they can harm anyone, Rui intercepts them with a swift strike. She confidently tells Hinata to leave the weaker enemies to her and focus entirely on taking down Guki. Agreeing to the plan, Hinata uses her acceleration lux to deliver a high-speed punch. However, Guki does not even flinch, effortlessly catching her fist with a single hand. Mocking her weak effort, he brutally slams her into the ground. Watching from the sidelines, both Ibuki and Rui shout her name in horror. Coughing up blood, she realizes his offensive power and physical durability are terrifyingly high, leaving her to wonder what his exact lux could be. He cracks his knuckles and coldly insults her, calling her a massive letdown. He claims she is just a pretty face propped up by rumors rather than actual skill. Refusing to stay down, she forces herself back up, determined to grow stronger and reach the level of her childhood idol. He completely dismisses her resolve and strikes her in the head. Grabbing her by the hair, he pulls her up and brutally forces her to look at the destroyed mall. He sadistically blames her for the ruined day, stating that the bystanders are suffering simply because she was too arrogant and weak to defeat him. The narrative then shifts to explain the concept of divine revelation. When a person turns 7 years old, a bell rings inside their head, granting them their specific lux and its accompanying umbra. The story flashes back to a 7-year-old Hinata, eagerly crossing off days on a calendar. Holding a clock as midnight approaches, she excitedly asks her parents what kind of elemental power she might receive. Her father excitedly hopes she receives a simple body enhancement lux, assuring Hinata she will become a fine exorcist regardless of the outcome. However, midnight passes in complete silence. Realizing she did not receive a blessing, she breaks down in tears, prompting her parents to quickly embrace her. Soon after, her peers begin viciously ostracizing her. They spread cruel rumors about her lack of power and warn each other to stay away lest they lose their own abilities. Although she eventually awakened a lux later in life, the trauma of that dark period still haunts her. Back in the present, Guki prepares a devastating strike, coldly stating that weaklings do not get to choose their dreams. Heavily bruised, she desperately struggles to stand. She repeatedly collapses but refuses to give up, angrily commanding her own body to move. Just before the villain can land a fatal blow, Ibuki boldly steps in between them. With her vision blurred, she initially hopes her savior is actually him. After clearing her eyes, she spots the familiar Niga Messiah robe and feels foolish for mistaking the enemy subordinate for the person she knows. She weakly asks why he is interfering. Annoyed by the sudden interruption, Guki demands to know why he is ruining the fun. Internally panicking because he jumped into the fray without a solid plan, Ibuki desperately decides to bluff his way out. He claims he slipped past his boss's watch specifically to continue their previous conversation about recruitment. The brute grins, assuming the rookie is finally joining his faction. Hearing this supposed alliance, both Hinata and Rui react with absolute shock. Ibuki verbally confirms his intention to become a subordinate. Suddenly, an arrow shoots down from above, narrowly missing Guki and pinning his cape. Cursing loudly, the brute looks up toward the source of the attack. The newcomer reveals herself as a member of the Prim Libra 10th Division, casually commenting that her target is still as sharp as ever. Guki curses the persistent 10th Division member. Realizing the sudden disadvantage, he commands his squad to grab their fallen allies and retreat immediately. Hinata tries to stop them, but they vanish before she can act. Frustrated, she drops to the ground and curses her own weakness. After getting her injuries bandaged, Rui attempts to comfort her. However, Hinata bitterly admits she was completely powerless and only survived because Ibuki, the enemy subordinate, stepped in. She briefly wonders why she subconsciously overlapped the villain's silhouette with her companion. Suddenly remembering that she left him alone in the mall, she panics about his safety. Right on cue, Ibuki approaches her in his normal clothes. Amazed and relieved to see him unharmed, she frantically asks if he is okay and if he got caught in the crossfire. He reassures her that he is perfectly fine, claiming his safety is entirely thanks to her. She immediately puts herself down, stating she was completely useless in the fight. He firmly denies this, praising her for keeping the civilian damage to an absolute minimum and telling her she did a great job. Despite his sincere reassurance, she remains unable to smile. Meanwhile, the 10th Division member observes them from a distance. She mentally encourages the young hero not to be discouraged by the overwhelming power gap. Her thoughts then shift to the enemy subordinate who wore the spider lily robe. Recognizing him from intelligence reports as Kushina's subordinate, she carefully analyzes his actions during the clash. She realizes his positioning at the last second was so perfectly timed that it almost felt like he was secretly fighting on their side. A few hours after the devastating mall attack, the group decides to disband and head home. In the kitchen, Kushina chops vegetables, while Ibuki explains everything that happened. Since he only acted to help Hinata and the civilians, she understands his reckless behavior. He embraces her from behind to fulfill the physical contact requirement of his Umbra, playfully asking if she will forgive him for interrupting her cooking. She dryly replies that his Umbra is an entirely different issue. She then expresses serious concern over how dangerous the situation was. As she speaks, he falls into deep thought. He realizes that his continuous interference is drastically altering the story's timeline. Because of him, Rui has grown fiercely overprotective much earlier than intended, and Guki appeared far ahead of his scheduled debut, causing injuries that were never supposed to happen. He finally understands the massive butterfly effect a simple mob character can cause, making him seriously question if he should stay involved with the main cast. Noticing his intensely gloomy expression, Kushina teasingly tells him to look in a mirror. Before he can respond, the doorbell rings. He opens the gate to find Hinata standing outside. Amazed, he quickly asks about her injuries and work duties. She assures him that she handled all her reports and is completely fine. Bowing deeply, she sincerely apologizes for ruining his day off and dragging innocent people into danger. Secretly, he blames himself for the timeline changes that caused the disaster in the first place. Kushina steps toward the door, noting her perfect timing. She invites the young hero to stay for dinner, as thanks for dealing with his troublesome behavior, offering to notify her mother. Hinata happily accepts. Stepping inside, she mentions how nostalgic the smell of the house feels. Kushina explains that this is the Proust effect, where the sense of smell is directly linked to a person's memories. Hinata praises her intelligence, to which the cook jokingly replies that flattery will only earn her a meal. After they finish eating, Ibuki suddenly brings up the upcoming Centennial Festival. Both of his companions are surprised by the mention. Hinata playfully comments that Kushina spoils him too much, while his partner sighs, noting that he is far too relaxed and well-fed. At the dinner table, Ibuki confusedly asks if Kushina is talking about a pet, but she clarifies she is talking about him. Hinata gently shifts the topic to the upcoming Centennial Festival, an event commemorating the 100-year anniversary of the discovery of Lux. She explains that all branches of Prim Libra will be on high alert during the celebrations, but she still managed to secure a few days off. Observing her closely, he realizes she still seems quite down from the previous battle. he notices that Kushina catches this lingering sadness as well. Determined to make his favorite character smile, he suddenly stands up and invites Hinata to attend the festival together. Flustered and blushing, she asks if Kushina will join them, but the cook quickly excuses herself, claiming she will be too busy. She then suggests inviting Rui instead. Panicking at the thought of being murdered by the overprotective partner, he desperately rejects the idea. He grabs her hand and smoothly insists he wants it to be just the two of them so they can make up for lost time. She blushes heavily and shyly agrees. Kushina watches the exchange in amusement, wondering how this date will end. Meanwhile, far away, Rui inexplicably senses the romantic tension and furiously punches a wall in a jealous rage. The day of the festival finally arrives. At the Prim Libra 10th Division headquarters, Vice Division Chief Ishindao Isana stretches at her desk and loudly complains about being buried in paperwork while the rest of the city celebrates. A passing subordinate scolds her for taking unauthorized breaks. She sarcastically thanks him for his dedication and grumbles about their division chief being completely absent during such a busy time. Suddenly, Rui stumbles into the office looking utterly miserable. Isana pauses her complaints, easily reading the tense atmosphere. She asks why the young prodigy is moping around headquarters alone on her scheduled day off. Furious and depressed, Rui complains that she should be spending the day with Hinata, but her partner is nowhere to be found. Rui desperately asks Vice Chief Isana if she knows where Hinata is. Isana admits she has no idea, casually suggesting that perhaps the young hero went out to enjoy the Centennial Festival. Rui's eyes immediately well up with tears at the thought of her partner wandering the crowded festival all alone. Noticing her distress, Isana quickly apologizes and tries to backtrack, stating she might be completely mistaken. However, Rui points out that her partner actually turned down her prior invitation to go. She recalls that her teammate seemed unusually restless lately, as if she desperately wanted to change something. Piecing the clues together, she reasons that since her partner is not the type to attend a festival alone, she must have gone with someone else. The horrifying realization that someone else took her partner on a date sends her into a downward spiral of jealousy. Emitting an incredibly dark and menacing aura, Rui abruptly turns around. She blankly thanks Isana before storming out to hunt them down. Left behind, the vice chief awkwardly acknowledges her departure, thoroughly unnerved by the heavy, terrifying atmosphere in the room. Meanwhile, entirely oblivious to the impending danger, Ibuki and Hinata walk side by side through the bustling Centennial Festival, both blushing heavily as they enjoy their date. The Centennial Festival is bustling with energy. 5 main streets stretch out from Station 5, lined with countless stalls beneath giant, aura-like cherry blossom petals. Ibuki and Hinata wander through the lively venue on their date. He admits he was worried since they did not plan anything, but the vibrant atmosphere keeps things exciting. She happily agrees. Later, they stop to enjoy some ice cream. After taking a few bites, she openly stares at his treat. Catching her gaze, he offers her a taste. Though hesitant at first, she leans in and takes a bite, becoming incredibly flustered. When he asks how it tastes, she is too embarrassed to answer properly, admitting she could not even process the flavor. Confused, he genuinely offers her more. Suddenly, a passerby bumps into her, nearly causing her to drop her ice cream. Reacting quickly, he subtly uses his separation lux to catch the falling scoop and place it perfectly back on the cone. She notices the magical interference and asks if that was his ability. Panicking that his secret villain identity might be exposed, he frantically denies it. However, she simply smiles and thanks him, mentioning it has been a long time since she saw his power. He breathes a massive sigh of relief, glad his cover is still intact. Shortly after, someone else bumps into him, pushing him forward. To steady himself, he accidentally grabs her hand. He quickly realizes that because he just used his lux on the ice cream, his umbra is now active, requiring him to maintain physical contact with her for over a minute. Desperate for a cover story to satisfy the magical price, he apologizes and suggests they continue holding hands so they do not get separated in the dense crowd. She nervously agrees, and an awkward but sweet romantic tension settles between them. As they stiffly hold hands, a few onlookers stare, loudly whispering that they look silly and shameless. Annoyed by the rude onlookers, Ibuki mentally scolds them for bumping into people without apologizing. Finally, his umbra time limit expires, and their hands safely separate. Overwhelmed with embarrassment, Hinata crouches on the ground to hide her blushing face. She offers to fetch them drinks, but he insists on going instead so she can rest. As he walks away, he deeply regrets making the situation so awkward. Suddenly, he spots Rui standing atop a nearby building, glaring down at the crowd with menacing intensity. Meanwhile, resting on the bench, Hinata struggles to calm her racing heart. She feels incredibly lightheaded from the intimate hand-holding. Desperate for a distraction, she watches some nearby festival goers playing a goldfish scooping game. Seeing them win reminds her of her own feelings, but she quickly shakes her head. She tries to convince herself that her feelings for him are purely admiration. She rationalizes that he already has Kushina by his side, noting that they live together and practically act like a married couple. Brushing her romantic thoughts aside, she decides to focus on her hunger, planning to make him buy her plenty of food as an apology when he returns. To her surprise, Ibuki suddenly rushes back and swiftly pulls her close, hiding her face against his chest. Confused by the sudden embrace, she wonders what he is doing. He internally panics, knowing that if Rui spots them together in the crowd, she will definitely attack. He whispers for Hinata to stay completely quiet and follow his lead. Navigating through the dense crowd, he successfully avoids the angry teammates' line of sight. Once clear of the immediate danger, he grabs her hand and starts running. He apologizes for grabbing her again, but she simply follows, silently accepting that she is content just watching his back. They duck into a secluded side street to catch their breath. Suddenly, she lets go of his hand, turning pale and completely red. Confused, he asks, "What is wrong?" Following her gaze, he realizes they accidentally ran into a quiet district famous for its romantic couples' inns. Completely flustered by the inappropriate setting, she shouts at him and runs away. He desperately calls out, swearing it is a huge misunderstanding. Suddenly, Rui steps out from the shadows. Pointing her floating swords directly at him, she angrily asks what part of the situation is a misunderstanding and fiercely threatens his life.
Here I am, know it's been a while.